Hello and welcome F11 members to issue 22, the November issue of the Chasing the Light e-zine. We're working again on the fundamentals of post-production with this video tutorial, and what I'd like to do today to run alongside the behind the lens feature in the same issue and the video blog is take you through the post-production on this shoot of the Northern Lights in the Yukon. So here are the images in Lightroom. I've captioned them all, the Aurora Borealis over Ruby Mountain and Pine Lake in the Yukon territories. And looking at the images now, as you can see, I started working on these shots, and they're basically over the course of an hour or so, the Northern Lights just got more and more distinctive. And I think the Northern Lights are best in these frames here. If I go to develop so you can see them full frame, you can see this wonderful sort of tone and shape and form to the Northern Lights glowing there in the sky. I did two exposures essentially. Here you can see the details up here. 12,800 ISO with the 14mm lens at f4 and a 20-second exposure, and at that exposure the stars in the sky are recorded virtually as pinpricks of light, sparkling stars, as stars are supposed to do. Now over here, the adjacent frame, virtually the same image, but you can see a slightly longer exposure, 30 seconds. Now what I've done is that you can see the stars in the frame here are starting, not so much there, but you can see a bit of movement on the stars there because of the 30-second exposure. But it's given me more shadow detail. So what I'm proposing to do is to take this shot, the sky from this shot. Obviously these pictures were taken within seconds of each other, so it's a fair representation of what was going on in the sky there. I'm going to take the sky from this frame and the lower portion of the image area from this frame, which has just a bit more shadow detail. I have to have images which are very close to each other in time and exposure so that the reflections match up to the sky. Otherwise it just wouldn't look natural. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is let's just work on the picture with the sky, the night sky in. And so first thing I'm going to do is start working down through my options here. Now you'll remember from previous video tutorials on post-production, generally speaking I never change the color balance. But it has to be said, this is the exception that proves the rule. Now, with night skies, I find the general sort of greeny feel to it all is not that attractive, and I tend to go with a tungsten white balance. Now, if I just click on that, you can see it gives the night sky a much bluer feel, which to me just seems much more natural. Of course, what is natural is open to interpretation. The Northern Lights themselves have a very bluey feel, but it is purely subjective, and you can see tungsten light balance, a white balance of 2850 Kelvin. Again, that's purely taste, but that's what I'm going to go for. Moving down now, here I'm going to come to highlights. Well, I have no clipping highlights, so I don't need to deal with that. Shadows. Now you can see up here I've got some clipped shadows, and that would relate to, if I hover my cursor over there, it's going to tell me where they are, and they're going to be down in this lower portion of the frame. Of course, that's the area of the image we're taking from the slightly brighter exposure, this one here, so I don't really need to worry about it in this particular exposure, so I'm not going to adjust that shadows slider. Coming down here, blacks as well. If I move my cursor to the right, it takes care of the clipping of those blacks. So I'm just going to dial in. Again, I don't want to do this too much because that's filling in down here, whereas I'm only concerned with that top part of the image. So I'm just going to put the slight movement there on that cursor to about there, just to fill in these just a little bit, not fill in, but boost the shadow detail in this hillside here. Okay, so let's move on down to the curve now. Sorry, let's just adjust. Yeah, let's go to curve first. Always go to the curve first. That exposure on the sky looks very good. Not much adjustment is needed really. I'm just going to boost the brightness of the sky just a touch and pull back on the toe of the curve, so to give a little bit of contrast. Not much, but that's about what I want. And there we have quite a vibrant sky. You know from what I've said before, I'm not a great fan of the clarity slider, but in this case I think there's a case for using some of it. Now if I go, you can see, go way over here, you can see it's really making that sky look horrible and gritty and everything, but just a touch, just round about, or somewhere 12 is just bringing in, just emphasizing those sparkling skies, just a little bit of contrast in the sky to emphasize the stars in the sky. The whole point behind this shoot was the northern lights combined with the starry night, in beautiful balance of exposure between these northern lights and the sky and the stars. I'm going to put in a touch of vibrance, not much, but just a touch. And that's looking pretty good. We come down now to the sharpening, and I'm just going to pick a detail down here to adjust sharpening. Now with this image it's shot at a very high ISO, so you can see the noise coming through here, which is something we're going to move on to in a minute regarding noise reduction. But if I sharpen this image too much, it actually accentuates the noise. Again, I go to my Lightroom presets over here, and I'm going to go Sharpen Scenic. But I actually want a fair bit of masking on this, so I'm going to hold down Alt, and as I move over the masking here, the black is where some masking is going to be applied. And obviously I only want to sharpen the area of the image where there is significant detail. So there's lots, you can see in that sky, all those little speckles are stars. So it's a fair bit of masking that I'm applying here, and that looks about right to me. At that stage I now come down to noise reduction, something I'm not often working with because most of the time I'm dealing with exposures made at ISO 100, anything up to 800, 1600 really. Noise reduction noise is not an issue, but clearly with at ISO 12800 it is, and if we look in detail at the sky you can see that grittiness there. You'd expect that at 100% magnification, but clearly we need a bit of noise reduction here. So if I move this slider across, you can see the effect it has. It kind of smooths out the noise in the image. Now that's 100% noise reduction, and look, it's taken out all that noise. But there's always a flip side to this. It actually suppresses the detail. It actually starts suppressing the edges, softening the image, smoothing it over. So how much to add? Well, that's the big question really, and that's no luminance. And again, with these sort of things, if you find yourself round about the middle of the slider range, that's a good indication I'm actually just going to put on 35% luminance, and that just takes out a bit of that noise without suppressing the detail too much. I'm keeping the detail slider on the middle range there, and I've not touched contrast at all. So that is the luminance sharpening. Then, sorry, noise reduction. The next thing I need to look at is color. Now if I take color out, so there's none, I hope you can see it on video, but you can, with no color noise reduction, in here there is this, you can see little speckles of purple and the like. Again, you know, ISO 12800, we're really at pushing it, and you would expect this kind of, that is the unavoidable flip side of shooting at super high ISOs. But with a bit of color noise reduction, we can pretty much take it all out. How much? Well, I'm going to go to about 42, round about here, and that just takes out that noise coming through. I can afford to pull that back a little bit actually. With all of these things, the less the better, so only put in as much as you really need. So what I'm going to do now is keep it at that, and I'm virtually finished with this image now. I zoom out, and bear in mind I'm looking at the top half of the frame there. So let's just compare where we started with where we're at now, next to each other. You can see how the big difference is the color balance, but the just boosting a little bit of the levels there, noise reduction as well. It's just cleaned up the image quite nicely. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is move to address the other frame, which is a slightly brighter one, this one. And actually, when you're doing this sort of post-production, what's really handy is I'm going to go back to the one I've just worked on here, that one there, and I'm going to go copy, and what that is doing is copying all the adjustments I've made. So, and then I go to this frame here, and I go paste, and those same adjustments are applied to that image. Now it might not be, you know, I'm now going to go back and just double check all these adjustments. Color balance, well, that's going to stay the same. In terms of blacks, I'm just going to boost the blacks just a touch more, just to get a bit more fill-in information here, and the shadows as well, because I'm really concerned about the darkness of the bottom of this frame here. So I'm going to go up to somewhere about there on the shadows, and now if I look down here at the tone curve again, I want to just generally increase the brightness of this image, the lower half. Bear in mind it's going to have to match the top half of this picture. If I end up with these tones here being brighter than the tones in the sky, I'll have problems. It just won't look natural. But I'm pretty happy with that. Fine tune it. I think my noise reduction and sharpening parameters will be exactly the same for the other image, so I don't need to consider them. They've been applied. Just look at where we started. Look at the difference there. Bear in mind you can never put in detail that's not there in the first place, but clearly we have considerable scope to really bring out and really lean on the exposure latitude of the raw file, and that's what we're doing. Okay, now at this stage I'm ready to export them and put them together in Photoshop. So I'm just going to highlight both of them. I'm going to go to Library, Export, and tell Lightroom what to do with them as usual. I'm going to put them in a folder called Processed down here. Okay, select folder. I'm going to put them in a subfolder called Yukon. I want to rename the image, keeping the original file name. I've given it a custom text of Cluhani, which is the area. Actually, I'm going to change that because technically these pictures were not shot in Cluhani, just outside of the national park. Actually, this is Pine Lake, so I'm going to call them Pine. I want TIFF, Profoto RGB color space, 16-bit depth, and I do not want to resize. I want a resolution of 300. I do not want to sharpen because I've done that already, adjusted that already, and everything else no. So here we go. I export. So I'm going to welcome you back in part 2 to take a look at putting these images together in Photoshop. Okay, see you there.